It's always worth lawyers, I think, going back and revisiting what they understand by the rule of law.
So the rule of law is all about fairness, due process, access to justice.
A set of principles through which all aspects of life can be conducted.
Those rules keep us safe and give us justice, and I call that the rule of law.
Because it gives us a mechanism by which we can enforce rights and have rights.
Of how law should be used to improve people's lives.
So effective and humane justice system and institutions are fundamental to building societies that facilitate growth and development.
The rule of law not being necessarily something that we consider on a day-to-day basis in the comfort of our jobs.
We do not value the rule of law sufficiently.
In a society without the rule of law, citizens will experience a fragmented and frequently ineffective legal and judicial system, and a significant lack of capacity and accountability of government institutions.
You immediately feel it. You immediately, again, start to have your safety rug start to be tugged from under you. That safety rug of the rule of law.
Without it, there ceases to be legal certainty and legal protection, and that's ultimately what hurts the vulnerable the most. They're the people who feel it first.
And that means that there will be an increase in attacks on members of the legal profession and human rights defenders, because they will be more vulnerable to criminal activity.
What we do see in many jurisdictions is stigmatization of lawyers who are representing those who governments don't agree with or are a thorn in the side of governments.
I'd say oppressive techniques used against a lot of people, that PBI companies, and this has really become a big thing in recent years, has been the criminalization of human rights defenders.
You can't help but respond to it, particularly just being vilified by the authorities and the state as well. I find really shocking. I mean, where that is meant to be, that's where your support should be from.
And Kahar itself was receiving not only death threats, but attempts to bug their offices, also defamatory campaigns in the press.
People might be kidnapped for a certain number of hours, be threatened that if they didn't stop their work, then there would be worse repercussions to come. People would approach their friends, their loved one, and tell them to pass on a message. Sometimes that would be coded. Sometimes it would be an outright threat, but certainly family members were not off limits, nor were children. It wasn't uncommon for people's children to be approached outside their school.
Threats from sectors of military intelligence, threats from some units of the police, threats from unknown individuals. None of these were duly investigated.
Corruption has a devastating effect in the entire justice system because it seeks to perpetuate impunity.
In a situation like in Uraba, was that I enjoyed a degree of protection that local people didn't. Nonetheless, I remember being followed in the street. I remember people coming up to me in pickup trucks, slowing down as I walked down the street.
Appalling that people should be subject to threats of doing their job properly and for defending rights. These states should make sure they aren't threatened.
And that was low-level intimidation by comparison. But the chill I felt at being approached by people with very sinister motives was very powerful. And it gave me just a little glimpse of what Colombians deal with day after day.
I think it's a huge luxury being a lawyer working in human rights in this country. I don't face threats going to court.
That one's able to live a very normal life quite often when I visit other countries, one has armed protection.
I'm always happy and proud to tell people what I do. That's a luxury that's simply not reality for people operating in fragile societies.
And that, that they would carry on doing that work despite, terrible things happening.
As a fellow professional, you feel, well, how could I work in those circumstances? You hope you would be able to, but until you actually face the risks, you can't say, can you? It's very easy to say things from the safety of where we are now.
I'm just humbled by that kind of work, because I would, I struggle to see whether I could do it in those kind of circumstances.
People's family members were killed, and being there with those people while they sort of worked through that grief but carried on with their work was amazing. And I just left with a feeling of admiration at the struggle that people were engaged in.
It is just a different world. So, you do wonder what actually you can do to help in that world, or indeed how you would react if you were in it.
I found working in pro bono work alongside organisations like Peace Brigade International not only humbling, but also very educational for me.
PBI UK indirectly works towards supporting the rule of law. And it does that essentially by the work that PBI does with lawyers and victims groups and various other human rights defenders in the field.
And I think the purpose of Alliance is simply for a set of people who share values but recognise they are privileged to at least feel they are trying to do something to support people for whom those very same things are a danger and a risk.
And I do consider that we have a responsibility within the UK to work to protect lawyers and human rights defenders in Colombia, Honduras, Kenya, so many countries around the world where they do need our support.
And the international community was very much there to echo and reinforce what they were saying and ensure that the information of what was happening on the ground and what the local civilian civic society groups were asking for, well, to amplify that and take that to the decision makers outside of Colombia, into the UN or to the inter-American sphere.
And I really considered that just the fact of them knowing that we are watching and that we're listening when there is an issue does, in my experience, it certainly does seem to help them.
I met human rights lawyers for the first time in London, in fact, and was astonished by their bravery and how they managed to continue to work in the face of these threats.
They need to know how important they are to the world of global justice. They are making a huge difference within their own particular countries and their own states in helping the vulnerable, helping those without a voice.
And that's why human rights defenders often play an essential role in allowing victims, and often in countries in which it's difficult to get access is where you get the worst violations of human rights. So human rights defenders play an essential role in giving voice to victims.
And I just remember that when the lawyer for the victim stood up to speak, she had the whole room gripped, and she was really able to inject that humanity into the court process. And I just thought that it was such an important job and that really she was doing history.
Glimpses of what should be done through their work. Without them, I think that task would be unachievable.
Because to stand up knowing that you're not just standing up against those military officers who are outside, but the whole system behind them. It was really something quite remarkable. And I thought, wow, this is where change happens.
I was particularly struck by the inventiveness, resilience, and their attachment to the rule of law to try and find ways of making international law work for them, how to apply it in the field, in the middle of the Darien jungle.
But also they are contributing on the international stage to keep the international law strong by using it to hold governments and executives to account.
Because if they were not there, the waters would close over the rule of law.
The reasons that you are not doing it are not money or status, because the lawyers that we accompany don't have much of either, I suspect, within the countries where they work.
I think they are moved by their ability to be compassionate, to have empathy of the suffering and the marginalization of communities or even people.
Their search for truth and their search for justice is relentless.
In a way, they embody what they are going after. So that keeps them motivated. They believe that what they are doing is the right thing.
I mean, if they weren't doing the job, where would the country be?
And it's always a really humbling experience to realise not only that these are people of extraordinary legal ability, of extraordinary commitment to human rights, but also just absolute bravery.
I imagine that their job is scary and that they feel that fear, but to be able to manage that and to be able to work with that kind of fear alongside you is really something remarkable and very admirable, and of course it's inspiring.
Him deciding that the ultimate outcome is a higher priority than his own well-being, and that is remarkable. There are very few people, I think, around the world who do that, and he is one of them.
But I have been very impressed to see the way that the lawyers who work with PBI are defending human rights, not just the environment, but other rights, in much more challenging circumstances than we face here.
And so I always have a kind of a mix of admiration, of humbleness and respect. And also there's a bit of me that's also, kind of takes pride in being part of a profession that they're members of as well.
My philosophy has always been that we've all got an awful lot to learn. Yes, we are lucky. Yes, we take things for granted. Yes, we haven't had a judge convicted of corruption for 200 years. And when I go around the world, and it's not only with PBI, with the Slynn Foundation in Eastern Europe, with the Commonwealth judges in Black Africa and the Caribbean, one sees brave lawyers standing up for the rule of law, wanting to join in partnerships with us. And it's a partnership of equals. It's not a partnership of teachers and learners in any way. And it is really quite inspiring to be able to be involved in that partnership.